Hi everyone! In this video I want to show a game between Deac Bogdan-Daniel, the youngest grandmaster from Romania, and Wojtaszek Radoslaw from Poland with an elo of 2738, and he's one of the strongest players in the world. Currently he's on place 21. The game was played in a European Individual Chess Championship from 2018, round 2. Let's see the game. Knight to f3, flexible move, controlling d4 and e5 squares. In the opening we should develop minor pieces, knights before the bishop, make castle and connect the rooks by moving the queen. Let's see if players follow these rules. Black reply with knight to f6, c4. This pawn move allows the queen to enter the game via a4 d1 diagonal. In the opening, pawn moves are good only if they help us to develop a piece. e6 prepares the dark square bishop development. g3 valid pawn move intending to put the light square bishop on the long diagonal. d5 bishop to g2, bishop to e7. Both players want to castle, and d4 placing another pawn in the center and in the same time allowing the dark square bishop to develop on c1 h6 diagonal. Short castle, black king is safe and white does the same. Most played move in this position is to take on c4, and white can reply with queen to c2 or knight to e5, and black cannot defend the pawn from c4. In the game he played knight bd7, developing another piece. Let's see what would happen if black takes on c4 instead of this move. We would have d takes on c4, queen to c2, trying to get the pawn. If black tries to defend this pawn with b5, we can notice that a8 h1 diagonal is opened and white can attack the rook from a8 with knight to e5, c6 blocking the diagonal. Knight takes on c6, knight takes, bishop takes on c6, rook to b8. In this position, black has a pawn majority on the queen side and white has a pawn majority on the queen side. In the game, knight b to d7 was played. White continued with queen to c2, keeping an eye on the c4 pawn, c6. This pawn move defends the center and opens d8, a5 diagonal for the queen to enter the game, and white should continue his development of his knight to d2. To c3 is not good because black can take on c4 and then protect the pawn with b5. Another popular move for white here is to play b3, intending to put the dark square bishop on the long diagonal. In the game, white chose to play rook to d1, a developing move, putting the rook on a central file. For the moment it's defending the pawn, and black continue with b6, allowing the light square bishop to go to b7 or a6. Bishop to f4, developing, controlling b8 h2 diagonal, and bishop to h6, developing and threatening to take on c4. White has several options to defend this pawn with knight bd2, b3, or take on d5. In the game, knight to e5 was played, moving the same piece in an opening, defending c4, attacks c6, backward pawn, and opens the light square bishop. If black takes on e5 with the knight, we would have d takes on e5, knight to d7, c takes on d5, c takes on d5, and e4, trying to open the bishop diagonal, and black cannot take this pawn because after white recapture we will have a double attack on the rook from a8 and the pawn from h7. That's why in the game we have rook to c8, placing the rook on the same file with white queen, defending c6 pawn, and white in this position took on d5, and this pawn is attacked twice. Black took with the knight. The bishop is attacked and white doesn't want to retreat. He goes forward and takes the pawn from c6 with the knight. This is very risky because the knight is pinned, but Deac calculated this very well. He used the fact that the bishop from a6 is unprotected. In the game we had knight to b4 attacking the queen and the knight. The queen goes forward defending the knight and attacks the bishop. Instead of this move, if white would have taken on e7 with check, we have queen takes on e7, queen to d2, moving away from the attack, knight to c2, attacking the rook. After knight to c3, knight takes on a1, we see that black is an exchange up, so taking on e7 is not good. So what Deac played in the game is very good. Queen to a4 going forward, black took on c6, we have bishop takes on c6, bishop takes on e2, attacking the rook. The rook goes on the open file, protecting the bishop one more time, knight to b8, attacking the bishop, bishop to g2, queen to d7. Black wants to exchange queens and take the game into an endgame, and white accepts this challenge. Queen takes, and here black plays an intermediate move. Rook takes on c1 check, bishop takes on c1, and knight takes on d7. The plan in an endgame is made around the pawn structure. For our opponent, we should attack his weak pawns, and for us, the plan is to push our best pawns. If none of these two plans can be achieved, we should try to weaken opponent pawns by force them to move, fix them, and the most important thing, do not exchange them. In this position, the material situation is equal. White should continue the development of his knight, bishop, and rook. We can see that the knight can go to c3 and to b5, attacking a7 pawn, forcing it to go forward, and then we would have two weak pawns that can be attacked. The bishop can go to f4 and the rook can come to c1, controlling the open file. The rook can go to c7, attacking along the 7th rank. For the moment, the light-square bishop is very well placed here. Usually the bishops in an endgame should be placed in the center, because here they can control both sides of the board. We can notice that white has an isolated pawn on d4, and if black managed to exchange all the pieces, he will have good winning chances, because he will capture this pawn and black would have a pawn majority on the king side. Let's see what happened in the game. White continued with knight to c3, developing and attacking the bishop, bishop to c4, bishop to f4, knight to f6, rook to c1. White managed to bring all his pieces into the game, and now he should start creating some weaknesses in black camp. Rook to d8, attacking the isolated pawn, defending, king to f8. In an endgame, the king is a valuable piece that needs to be brought into the game. The king works very well with pawns. a4, trying to weaken black pawns, but this move gives away the control of b2 square, and black takes advantage of this and attacks the pawn with bishop to b3. Knight to b5, attacking a7, a6, knight to c7, attacking a6 pawn, bishop takes on a4, knight takes on a4, and black played knight to d5, attacking the bishop and controlling b4 square retreat for the knight. White decided to give up his light square bishop because the knight on d5 is very strong, so bishop takes, he takes on d5. Another way for black was to take with the rook. Now white doesn't have to protect anymore this d4 pawn, so he plays his bishop on another diagonal with bishop to d2, bishop to b5, attacking the knight, knight to b4, bishop to f4, attacking d4 pawn, defending. In this position, black played g5. He's controlling f4 and h4, and white can go forward with his rook, trying to follow one of the endgame plans to attack opponent weak pawns. Rook to c7, intending rook to b7, g4. White has to be a little careful, because if he continues with his plan of taking the pawn, he can get mated. Let's see that line. For example, after rook to b7, rook to a8. If white takes on b6, we would have rook to a1 check, king to g2, bishop to f1 check, king to g1, and bishop to h3. We can stop the mate by one move, and the rook takes and its mate. So white has to prevent this. That's why in the game he played h3, making some room for the king to escape. Black took on h3, and now white can continue his plan of taking this pawn. Rook to b7, bishop to e2. If black tries to go and grab the pawn, the bishop can go to f1 and then to g2, defending the pawn. White took the pawn, and the pawn structure has changed, and white has passed pawn, so he should start pushing this pawn and continue the attack on black weak pawns, the one from d5 and the one from h3 and h7. Also, with this move, the rook is attacking the bishop. Black defended the bishop with the king to h2, trying to get this pawn. Bishop to f1, defending. g4, trying to attack the bishop with g5, but black moves the bishop forward. And the drawback of this move is that the 6th rank is free, and white can give a check with the bishop or play g5, trying to trap this bishop on the king side. In the game, bishop to h6 was played, check, king to g8, and here white moved his bishop back to e3. Usually moves back are not good. Other options for white was to block the bishop with g5 or improve the knight position. Maybe white was afraid that black would play the plan with rook to a8, rook to a1, bishop to g2 and rook to h1. But white has a good reply for this. Let's see that line with g5, bishop to g2, knight to c6, rook to a8, knight to e7 check, king to h8, bishop to g7 check, giving the bishop, and then give a fork for the king and take the bishop, and the king has a retreat square, so there is no mate. In the game, instead of g5, white retreated his bishop to e3. Black continued with f6. This pawn move blocks the 6th rank for the rook. e5 and g5 squares are controlled. The drawback of this move is that white rook can go forward, keeping an eye on h7 pawn, and also black king is cut off on the 8th rank. So white played rook to b7, rook to a8. Black wants to catch white in a mating net. Also, this rook move removed the protection from d5, so this pawn can be attacked in the future. So white played knight to c6, intending to give a check. f5, this is a free pawn. The purpose of this move is to free the bishop to go back, but white pushed g5. As you can see, the bishop is trapped here. Black continued with f4, attacking the bishop, and if the bishop takes, black dark square bishop would take on f2. So in the game we had knight to e7 check, king to f8, bishop takes on f4, and in this position black didn't take on f2. Instead he played bishop to a6. Let's see what would happen if he takes on f2. Bishop takes, g6, h takes on g6, knight takes on g6 check, and if the king goes to g8, he's mated after bishop to e5. He cannot escape this move. A rook to g7. So in the game, bishop to a6 was played, attacking the rook. Rook to c7, bishop to d3, defending a7. But white wins another pawn. Black is lost. As we can see, white has 3 passed pawns in this position. Rook to d8, attacking the knight and the pawn. Knight to f6. Black didn't take on d4. Let's see what would happen after rook takes on d4. Bishop to e3, attacking the rook. Rook to c4. Knight takes on h7 check. King to g8. Knight to f6 check. King to f8. Bishop to c5 check, and black is forced to give up the rook. And after this check, we can see that white is winning. He has 3 passed pawns and an exchange. So in the game, black continue with h6. If white takes this pawn, the knight is dropping. So we have knight to a7 check, king to g8, bishop to e5, defending the pawn. After this move, black resigned. A possible continuation for white would be just to take the knight, rook to g7 check, and black king cannot go to h8 because he's mated after rook to g6, so the king has to go to f8, rook takes on h7, black can take on g5, f4, attacking the bishop goes back to e7, the king can grab the pawn from h3, rook to d5, the rook can take the pawn from h6. In this position, white is winning. He has 3 passed pawns. White king can come into the center, helping the pawns to promote. So white is winning here. So this was the game between Deac Bogdan-Daniel, the youngest grandmaster from Romania, and Radoslaw Wojtaszek from Poland. I hope that you found this video useful. Please watch other games from my channel and leave some comments and suggestions in the comments section. See you next time. Bye.